Welcome to this extraordinary video. Today, we're going to tell you the story of a man who didn't fight battles, but trained a man who conquered the world. A man who never wore a crown, but shaped kings, emperors, scientists, and thinkers for the next 2,000 years. A man who didn't invent machines, but invented how we think about thinking. This is a life-changing, emotional, and inspiring story of Aristotle, the philosopher who taught Alexander the Great and the mind that built the very foundation of logic, science, politics, ethics, biology, education, and leadership. If you are someone who feels like the world doesn't understand your ideas, wants to learn English by listening to real powerful stories, or dreams of changing the world not with weapons, but with words and wisdom, then this story is for you. This is not just a biography. This is a journey through pain, passion, power, and purpose. From a curious little boy in northern Greece to the man whose brain became the blueprint of modern civilization. And yes, this video is also great for your English. You will improve your listening skills, your vocabulary, your understanding of history, and most importantly, you'll learn how one person, with nothing but questions in his mind, changed the world forever. So sit back, focus, and listen with your heart, because now begins the story of the man who taught the world how to think. Let's begin with the curious boy from Greece. In a small ancient town called Sagira in northern Greece, a baby was born in the year 384 BC. His name was Aristotle. His father's name was Nicomachus, a doctor, but not just any doctor. He was the personal physician to the king of Macedonia. That meant Aristotle grew up around people of power, medicine, and deep knowledge. He saw how his father used observation, diagnosis, and logic to understand the human body. This made a deep impression on young Aristotle. He didn't play with toys like most kids. He played with questions. He didn't care about games. He cared about how things worked. Even as a small child, he would stare at animals, leaves, clouds, wondering, why does a bird fly? Why does the sun rise? What makes us happy? What is truth? These were not normal thoughts for a child. But Aristotle wasn't born normal. He was born to observe the world deeply, and he would spend his entire life doing just that. But everything changed when he was just a boy. Tragedy struck early. Both his mother and father died. He became an orphan before he could even understand what death meant. That pain of being left alone so early never left him. But instead of becoming bitter, he became obsessed with life. He didn't ask, why me? He asked, what is life? What is death? Why are we here? His relatives took care of him, and eventually he was sent to Athens, the most famous city of learning in the ancient world. That's where his real journey began. At just 17 years old, Aristotle walked into a place that would change his life forever: Plato's Academy, the first real university in history. At the center of this academy was a man who was already a legend: Plato, the greatest philosopher of his time, and the student of Socrates. Imagine you are a 17-year-old orphan. You walk into a place filled with the smartest people in the world, and your teacher is a man who studied under Socrates himself, the man who chose to die rather than stop speaking the truth. For Aristotle, this was heaven. For the next 20 years, Aristotle stayed at the academy. He was not just a student. He became the most brilliant student Plato had ever seen. But even though Aristotle loved Plato, he didn't agree with everything. Plato believed in ideal forms, the idea that the real world is just a shadow and the perfect version of everything exists in another invisible realm. But Aristotle didn't believe that. He believed in what we can touch, see, measure, and test. Plato said, there's a perfect version of a tree somewhere out there. Aristotle said, no, this tree right here, let's study it. Let's understand it. He started writing about everything: animals, politics, human behavior, the stars, happiness, the soul. He wasn't trying to win arguments. He was trying to understand everything that exists. He asked millions of questions and wrote thousands of pages, all by hand, with no internet, no electricity, no tools except his brain and a scroll. He was becoming more than just a student. He was becoming a force of knowledge. But then something unexpected happened. When Plato died, everyone thought Aristotle would take over the academy. But he didn't. Why? Because some believed he was too different. His ideas were too scientific, too rebellious, too challenging to Plato's teachings. And so, even after 20 years of loyalty, dedication, and brilliance, Aristotle was not chosen. It broke his heart. He had lost his second home. Once again, like when he lost his parents, Aristotle had to walk away from something he loved. But this time, he didn't fall into darkness. He began a journey that would take him across the world and eventually into the life of a boy who would become the most powerful man in history. The academy door had closed behind him. He had given it 20 years of his life. He had studied harder than anyone, questioned everything, and offered his deepest loyalty. But in the end, it wasn't enough. The school needed a new leader, and they didn't choose Aristotle. Why? Because he didn't fit the mold. He didn't blindly follow Plato's ideas. He thought differently. He asked new questions. He wanted more than ideal worlds. He wanted to touch the real one. And for that, he was quietly pushed out. Now at the age of 37, Aristotle stood at a crossroads. He was homeless, no job, no city, no position. But his mind was burning with fire. Aristotle didn't complain. He didn't attack the academy or seek revenge. He simply turned toward the unknown. He believed that the academy won't hear my voice, the world will. He left Athens behind and began to travel from city to city, searching not for comfort, but for truth. He believed every place, every animal, every plant, every person carried a lesson, and he would collect them all. Aristotle's first stop was Assos, a city by the sea in Asia Minor, modern-day Turkey. It was ruled by Hermias, a former student of Plato. Plato and Hermias were wise, forward-thinking men who welcomed philosophers like family. Hermias saw the brilliance in Aristotle. He offered him a home, resources, and most importantly, the freedom to teach and think. Aristotle began holding lessons under the open sky. He taught not just theory, but real-world thinking, asking students to look, touch, measure, and wonder. It was here that something unexpected happened. Aristotle, the great mind, fell in love. He met Pythias, Hermias' adopted daughter. She was intelligent, thoughtful, and full of questions just like him. They married and later had a daughter, also named Pythias. The philosopher of reason was now also a father and husband. This changed him. He began writing more about ethics, family, and the balance of love and logic. He started asking himself, what is a good life? What makes a human life complete? His heart was full and his mind was expanding. But happiness is rarely safe for long. While Aristotle was building his peaceful world in Assos, the powerful Persian Empire was watching. They saw Hermias as a threat. A Greek leader supporting Greek philosophers was dangerous. The Persians captured Hermias, tortured him, and executed him. Aristotle was devastated. His friend, mentor, and protector was gone. This was a turning point. Aristotle realized something painful. Even wisdom cannot protect you from the cruelty of power. He wrote to him for Hermias, not just in sadness, but in honor. He carried his memory with him wherever he went next. Aristotle moved again, this time to Mytilene, a city on the island of Lesbos. He was older now, wiser, a bit quieter. Surrounded by the sea, something new awakened inside him. He became obsessed with life, not just human life, but all life. He studied fish, birds, insects, mammals. He observed the way they moved, the way they mated, the way they gave birth, the way they died. He dissected animals, drew what he saw, and took endless notes. This was the birth of biology. Not just ideas, but observation, comparison, classification. He discovered patterns, that dolphins breathe air, that octopuses change color, that chicks form inside eggs, that some fish lay thousands of eggs while others give live birth. No one in history had ever studied nature this closely. While others worship gods, Aristotle worshiped reality. He was building the first system of scientific knowledge the world had ever seen. Meanwhile, far away in Macedonia, a powerful king was thinking about Aristotle. His name was Philip II, and he had a son, wild, brilliant, and full of fire. That boy's name was Alexander. Philip wanted his son to learn wisdom before he learned war. So he remembered Aristotle, whose father had once served as royal physician, and who was now the greatest living mind in Greece. Philip sent an invitation. Come to Macedonia. Teach my son. I will give you everything you need. Aristotle accepted. Philip built a special school for Aristotle and Alexander in a quiet place called Mysa, surrounded by nature, trees, flowers, and silence. It wasn't a palace. It wasn't a battlefield. It was a garden of thought. Here, Aristotle taught not only Alexander, but also a group of young Macedonian nobles who would one day rule the empire with him. He taught them logic, philosophy, politics, ethics, literature, history, geography, medicine, rhetoric, and strategy. But most of all, he taught them how to think. He gave Alexander a special copy of the Iliad, the story of the Trojan War, with handwritten notes in the margins. That book became Alexander's Bible during his military campaigns. Alexander was not easy. He was bold, ambitious, and restless. But he respected Aristotle. The philosopher taught him that a great king must not only conquer, he must understand. It was one of the most important mentorships in human history. As Aristotle taught in Mysa, something amazing was happening behind the scenes. His ideas were spreading. His notebooks were multiplying. His thoughts were evolving. He was no longer just a philosopher. He was becoming a force of nature, shaping the future with every word, every lesson, every scroll. Soon, the boy he taught would become a man, and that man would ride out to conquer the world. When Alexander finished his education, he began his conquest, and Aristotle returned to Athens, older, wiser, and more famous than ever. He was no longer the rejected student. He was now the teacher of the world's most powerful man. This time, Athens welcomed him. He opened his own school, the Lyceum, a place very different from Plato's academy. Here he walked with his students, spoke while moving, asked endless questions, and taught everything from logic to literature, science to the soul, nature to nations. His students were called peripatetics, those who walk around. In this school, Aristotle didn't just teach. He created an intellectual movement. He began writing everything: politics, ethics, poetics, metaphysics, rhetoric, the soul, the history of animals, and hundreds more works. He wasn't just trying to be clever. He was trying to capture all human knowledge in one lifetime. He believed everything was connected. If we understand one thing deeply, we can understand everything. He created systems, definitions, categories. He said, logic is a tool for truth. Ethics is the path to happiness. Politics is the art of living together. Poetry is the mirror of emotion. Biology is the study of life itself. He believed in balance, in purpose, in observation, in discipline. He asked, what is this thing? What is its purpose? What makes it excellent? That's how he studied everything, from frogs to stars, from kings to plays, from human pain to the meaning of happiness. Where we stand now, Aristotle is in Athens. He has a school, he has students, he has ideas, and he has influence across the world. Thanks to Alexander's growing empire, Aristotle created a structured system to study everything: ethics, politics, biology, psychology, astronomy, economics, drama, logic, education, memory, emotion, dreams, the philosophy of war, the philosophy of friendship, the philosophy of life itself. To him, subjects were never separate. Everything was interconnected. He trained his students to observe the real world, to measure, to analyze, to question everything. They gathered laws from hundreds of city-states to write the first political science encyclopedia. They collected data about animals, diseases, cities, rituals, and plays. Everything was studied, labeled, and discussed. While Plato's philosophy was poetic and mysterious, Aristotle's was sharp, logical, and built for the real world. His writing was not beautiful. In fact, it was often dry and technical, but it was clear, honest, and structured like a blueprint of human knowledge. And that clarity made it endure for more than 2,000 years. But not everyone was happy. Aristotle's growing influence created enemies. Many Athenians never forgot that he was not born in Athens. They never forgot that his student, Alexander, was a Macedonian conqueror. To them, Aristotle was not a Greek hero, but a symbol of outside power. They did not see a teacher. They saw a threat. When Alexander began ruling more harshly, executing opponents, and even declaring himself a god, Aristotle's name became dangerous to speak in public. People whispered, was Aristotle advising Alexander? Does he support tyranny? Is he loyal to Athens or to the empire? None of it was true. Aristotle never sought power. He only wanted understanding. But public opinion is not logical, and the ground beneath him began to crack. Then came the news that changed everything. Alexander the Great was dead. He died suddenly in Babylon at just 32 years old. Some said it was fever, others poisoning, or perhaps simply fate. Whatever the cause, the empire he built in only 12 years collapsed almost overnight. Chaos spread. In Athens, people celebrated his death. To them, it was the fall of a tyrant, a chance to take back freedom. But their joy turned quickly into anger, not just against Alexander, but against his ideas, his allies, and his teacher. The same city that had once killed Socrates now turned on Aristotle, accusing him of impiety, of disrespecting the gods, of spreading dangerous ideas. Was he guilty? No. But in ancient Athens, logic never saved you. Powerful minds were feared, and philosophers were seen as threats. Aristotle understood the danger. He once wrote, "When democracy is ignorant, even wisdom becomes a crime." He knew that history was repeating itself. Instead of staying to defend himself, he quietly left the city. He is said to have told his friends, "I will not allow Athens to sin twice against philosophy." The first sin was killing Socrates. The second would have been killing him. So he fled. Aristotle returned to Chalcis, a city on the island of Euboea where his mother had once lived. He was in his 60s now, no longer surrounded by schools, students, or applause. He lived quietly with his books, his notes, and his thoughts. His beloved wife Pythias had died long before, but he now shared his home with her Pillis, a woman he cared for deeply, and with their son Nicomachus, named after his father. Even in exile, Aristotle never stopped writing. His body was aging, but his mind still worked like a living universe. He wrote about aging, memory, the soul, and the idea that everything is a cause, a purpose, and a final form. He described the unmoved mover, a force beyond time and change, a perfect mind that holds the order of the universe together. It was his quiet version of God, not a bearded figure on a throne, but pure thought, eternal and invisible, far from the city that had once celebrated and then betrayed him. Aristotle lived with a heavy heart, but an unstoppable mind. His name was no longer shouted in Athens. No eager students filled the shaded paths of the Lyceum. No messengers came from royal palaces. No crowds, no applause. But inside his small home, something still burned, because the world may forget you. But when you carry the universe inside your head, you still have something to give. Each morning, Aristotle rose early. He no longer had servants rushing about or great halls filled with scrolls. On a small table, he kept stacks of parchment reed pens and jars of black ink. His hands trembled more, his body slowed, but his mind was awake. He dipped his pen and wrote one sentence, then another and another, day after day, year after year. His final mission was simple: to make sure the truth outlived him. In these last years, he no longer chased fame or influence. He focused on first principles, the deepest, most fundamental questions. What is existence? What causes something to exist? What is the purpose of everything? What is the soul? What is a human being? Out of these reflections came his most abstract and difficult work, metaphysics. In it, he explored the nature of being, the structure of reality, and the unmoved mover, something that causes all motion but is not moved by anything else. Pure thought, divine intelligence. He wasn't writing to please kings or impress scholars. He was simply trying to explain the invisible architecture of the universe. And he did it in solitude. Yet Aristotle was not completely alone. He still had her Pillis and their young son Nicomachus. This boy carried not only his father's blood, but also his possibility, his hope. Aristotle loved him deeply. He spoke to him with the care of a philosopher, but also with the warmth of a father. When he began writing a new work on morality and the meaning of life, he named it Nicomachean Ethics, not because it was about his son, but because in that name he left his heart, a father's gift of wisdom instead of wealth. In it, Aristotle explained what it means to live well, why pleasure is not the highest goal, why virtue matters, why true happiness comes from balance, character, and purpose. He wrote, "We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, and is not an act but a habit. This became one of the most important books ever written about how to live. The seasons passed. Winters grew longer, summers shorter. His body weakened, his eyesight dimmed. Even when his fingers cramped, he still tried to write. Even when his breath grew shallow, he still whispered thoughts of truth. Because until the very end, Aristotle's mind refused to be silent. In his final years, Aristotle still argued with ideas inside his own mind. The man who had once taught kings, classified the animals of the earth, mapped the stars with nothing but logic, and built schools that shaped science and philosophy itself, now walked slowly through his garden or sat silently, watching the wind move through the trees. Sometimes tears filled his eyes, not from fear of death, but from a painful thought. Everything I've written could disappear. There were no printing presses, no libraries of stone, no cloud storage. Every word he wrote lived on fragile scrolls of thin, dry material, easily destroyed by fire, water, or neglect. He had written hundreds of works, some say over 200, but he knew that if just one generation failed to copy them, they might vanish forever. This thought haunted him. He did not want statues or temples in his name. He wanted only one thing, that knowledge should survive, even if he did not. When Aristotle knew the end was near, he wrote a will. It was not dramatic or emotional, but calm, logical, and thoughtful. He asked that Herpyllis, his companion, be treated with honor and given a home, that Nicomachus, his son, be educated well and cared for, that his servants be freed and granted dignity, that his body be buried beside Pythias, his first wife. No monuments, no grand ceremonies, just a clean ending to a life of deep thought. Aristotle died in 322 BC, 1 year after Alexander. He was around 62 years old. After his death, most of his works were scattered and nearly lost. His students tried to preserve them, but political chaos made the task impossible. For almost 2 centuries, his writings lay hidden in dusty basements, forgotten by the world. Entire generations lived and died without speaking his name. It wasn't until much later, in the Roman era, that his voice returned. In a small village in Asia Minor, in the cellar of a scholar's home, a fragile collection of scrolls sat in silence. Damaged, dusty, their ink fading, they were nearly unreadable. Then a wealthy book collector named Apellicon heard rumors of them. He traveled to the village, paid a fortune, and uncovered what no one thought still existed: the lost works of Aristotle. Though many scrolls were damaged, he brought them back to Athens, and Aristotle's words breathed again. When the Roman general Sulla raided Athens, he seized Apellicon's library and carried the scrolls to Rome. There, a scholar named Andronicus of Rhodes organized and preserved them. He categorized the writings into logic, ethics, politics, science, metaphysics. He gave us the organon, Aristotle's system of logic, Nicomachean ethics, on how to live, politics, on how to live together, poetics, on art and drama, metaphysics, on the nature of reality, the anima on the soul, and history of animals, the foundation of biology. These works became the skeleton of human knowledge, and they were almost lost forever. Centuries later, in the Islamic Golden Age, scholars in Baghdad, Cordoba, and Cairo began translating and studying Aristotle. They called him the first teacher. Thinkers like Avicenna, Averroes, and Al-Farabi expanded his ideas, debated them, and built new systems upon them. Through their work, Aristotle reached medieval Europe. In the 12th and 13th centuries, European scholars rediscovered him through Arabic translations, later rendered into Latin. At first, the church was suspicious. Aristotle was not Christian, and he did not write the Bible or God. But Thomas Aquinas saw his value. He fused Aristotle's logic with Christian theology, uniting faith and reason. In doing so, he made Aristotle the foundation of European thought. For centuries, European students studied Aristotle's works as the core of their education. His logic trained them to argue. His ethics taught them how to live. His politics guided them on society. His biology shaped the study of nature. His metaphysics pointed toward ultimate questions of being. Even scientists like Galileo and Newton, who disagreed with parts of his science, still relied on his method of observation and reasoning. Modern logic, classification, and even artificial intelligence trace roots back to his thought. His influence became so deep, so woven into the foundations of knowledge, that people stopped noticing it. Aristotle became the heir of Western thought. Everywhere, invisible but essential. Think of this. Aristotle lived before Christ, before the Roman Empire, before paper, before Islam, before telescopes, before democracy as we know it, before electricity, before the internet. And yet more than 2,000 years later, we are still asking his questions, still reading his words, still debating his ethics, still building systems on his foundation. Aristotle never raised an army. He never ruled a nation. He did not own land, nor did he command wealth. He died in exile, largely forgotten. And yet, his ideas outlived kings, empires, and centuries. His legacy was not carved in stone, but written in thought. And thought, as he proved, is stronger than time. He was nearly erased from history, forgotten, and yet he won, not with power, not with violence, not with status, but with thought. He didn't conquer cities. He conquered ignorance. He didn't build empires of land. He built an empire of reason. And today, whether we realize it or not, we all live in a world that Aristotle helped build. This is a philosopher who became time. His final gift of the world is that his name lives, his words live, his questions live, and through them we live better. But how? How did a man who was nearly erased from memory become the intellectual father of so much of what we call modern? The answer lies in what he left behind. Aristotle did not just teach students. He taught generations. His questions were so deep, so eternal, that every new age found itself staring at the same mysteries. What is a good life? What is truth? What is happiness? What is the soul? What is justice? How should society work? Why are we here? The reason we still read him today is simple. He never told people what to think. He taught them how to think. He didn't hand out answers. He gave tools to find them. That is why his teachings feel fresh even now. They do not sound like ancient knowledge. They feel like a mirror to modern life. Let's look at his most important teachings, explained simply, so anyone can understand and feel their meaning. The meaning of life. Aristotle believed everything has a purpose. The purpose of a knife is to cut. The purpose of a seed is to grow into a tree. And the purpose of human life is to become the best version of yourself. The goal is not just wealth, fame, or power, but living in a way that matches your potential. He called this eudaimonia, a word larger than happiness. It means a life that is full, meaningful, balanced, excellent, and honest. Real happiness. Happiness, he said, does not come from pleasure or money. It comes from virtue, being brave, kind, wise, disciplined, and fair. You do not become good by dreaming of it. You become good by doing good. Just as muscles grow through repetition, your character grows by repeated actions. Greatness. For Aristotle, greatness was not about luck or birth. He said, you are what you repeatedly do. If you lie each day, you become a liar. If you practice truth each day, you become honest. If you study every day, you become wise. Greatness is not a gift. It is habit, the best way to live. He believed in the golden mean, the balance between extremes. Not cowardly, not reckless, but courageous. Not lazy, not obsessed, but disciplined. Not silent, not rude, but honest. Balance is the path to peace. The soul, he taught, is not a ghost inside you. It is your form, your choices, your actions. It is what makes you you. For Aristotle, the soul was not what you feel, but what you do with your life. Virtue strengthens the soul. Dishonesty weakens it. Government. He believed society should help people become their best selves. He did not support total freedom or total control. He believed in justice, where both leaders and citizens live by reason. To him, politics was not about power, but about fairness, duty, and education. What makes us human? Aristotle said humans are more than animals because we ask questions of right and wrong, of purpose and truth, logic, language, memory, purpose. These are what make us human. And this is what made him special. He never stopped asking, and he never stopped teaching others to ask. Why should we tell his story today? Because we live in a world addicted to noise and attention, obsessed with opinions, always in a hurry. quick to forget wisdom and glorify fame. In that world, Aristotle is a lighthouse. He reminds us that quiet thinking is powerful, that truth needs patience, that growth takes time, that knowledge matters, that discipline is freedom, that greatness is not inherited, it is earned. And he reminds us of something even more timeless. Even if the world forgets you, if your work is honest, your words are clear, and your intent is pure, then you will live forever in the minds of those still learning to think. This story is not just about a philosopher. It is about you. Every sentence here helps you listen to real English, feel powerful ideas in simple words, practice thinking and speaking better, and grow your fluency through storytelling. You build vocabulary, confidence, and motivation while learning from timeless wisdom. Aristotle never spoke English, but the best way to learn English is by listening to real stories about real people with real meaning. And if you understood this story today, you are already growing. Long ago, a boy looked at the stars and asked, "Why does the world exist? What is my purpose? How should I live? How can I help others?" His name was Aristotle. He never saw airplanes, skyscrapers, satellites, or smartphones. He lived with scrolls and sandals, in silence and exile, yet he shaped our way of thinking. His body turned to dust, but his mind became time-proof. This is not just the end of the story. It is the beginning of a mindset. Ask more questions. Think deeper. Practice virtue. Become better each day. Learn something new each moment. Live with reason, love, balance, and purpose. That is what Aristotle would want for you. It is a legacy of a man who was nearly forgotten, but now teaches the entire world, including you. Now it is your turn. Read, listen, learn, question, grow, speak, change, and one day inspire. If this story touched you, if it taught you something new, if you felt its power, then carry it forward. Keep learning, keep growing, and never stop thinking.